Hi everybody, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to create a mini art journal and you won't believe how I started it. I also wanted to call this one Finding Joy in Mixed Media because in it I'm using my word of the year, joy. So here's how it started. It's a pamphlet, flyer, junk mail that I get, and it opens up and it creates 3 panels, double-sided. So I prepare it by giving it a coat of gesso, quick and easy with a brayer, and I come back and I give it another layer just to knock back all that print and the color. This also prepares the substrate to take whatever I am going to throw with it. So the color scheme that we're going to work with is quinacridone magenta, Naples yellow, and turquoise. I've discovered this in the past and I love these bright colors and they bring me joy. So the first layer here, I am going to use collage papers. I've got music papers and dictionary papers. This is going to add texture to the background. It also adds some pattern that in the end, little bits of this peek through and you never quite know what you're going to get. But it also builds up the paper and gives it some substance. So I'm just rearranging them. I'm ripping. I don't like harsh or straight lines on here. I'm layering it up because again, that's going to lead to texture. That's going to lead to the next step. As you can see, some of my papers are lighter, some are more yellowed. In the end, because I colorize this with the color scheme that I showed you, you're not going to see that neutralness of the papers. But that could be a way we could do it elsewhere. Once I have a rough idea of where I'm going to put everything, I grab my Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium and glue everything down, making sure that it's really adhered properly. I don't want this to lift later on. So this pamphlet, it opens up and I could treat this as one big page, 6 separate pages. I kind of do a cross between those. And these kind of pamphlets are great because it makes a mini art journal. It's 6 pages and it's easy to begin and end. Whereas if you used a regular art journal, mixed media art journal, sometimes there's so many pages and you feel like you've never completed anything. So I'm gluing that all down. Once it's dry, flip it over and I cut off the excess. All those little pieces of paper, get rid of that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm just not showing how I'm doing both sides. So now I want to add more interest to my background and I'm going to stencil and stamp with black. This is going to give some pattern that may peek through. And adding that black really builds contrast in this background. Now again, if you go to the end and you see the final product, you're not going to see a lot of this. But I didn't know that at this stage. You never know where a page goes. And as I'm looking at this, this is something that I would create again and not colorize it the way I am in this video. So you learn and take what you learn here and you can apply it forward. This is a sink liner that I've cut and I'm using as a mark maker. Here, this is a spice container. I love that shape and I'm putting black acrylic paint on there and stamping with it. So don't think that you have to always buy stamps or stencils. You make stamps out of everyday things that you can easily source out of the recycle bin or from the dollar store. So I'm loving this background and like I said, it's nice and neutral and I think I recreate this exactly as this is and take it in a different color zone. So now that the one side, I'm going to dry this and then I'm going to repeat everything on the other side. but you're going to want to dry it, especially when you stamp with wet acrylic paint, it kind of globs. So here again is our color scheme. And we want to use those colors and we're going to put them on wet as a base coat of color. And wet on wet allows you to, you put on the yellow and then the pink beside it, and then that kind of makes the orange. It allows you to blend them easier, but you do have to work quite quickly. And as you can see, I've abandoned the makeup sponge and I opted to use my fingers. So again, basic color theory here. We got the pink and the turquoise makes a purple. The pink and the yellow makes an orange. The yellow and the blue makes a green. And I can work as I'm putting the paint on and get more of these colors or less as I go. Now I'm noticing that when I make the purple, it's really, really dark, and I don't want this page to be dark. So you can tweak it and avoid, you know, I don't want a lot of green on here because I'm not fond of that color and it's just not in the picture in my head. So I'm just going around, adding more paint, blending it wet on wet. And you can see the turquoise paint's a little more opaque. It's knocking back what's behind it. The quinacridone magenta is very translucent and you can see what's behind it more. So you can use those things to your advantage and get a different effect depending on the opacity of the paint. So now that that's dry, I am going to stencil all over with white paint. Now, I love the look of white on top. It just, something magical happens here and I really enjoy it. So I'm using this Jungle Vine stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and this and all the products that I'm using are good basics. I'm going to list those in the description box and you can go check them out. And I'm just moving this around. Now I like botanicals in the background, and that's what these leaves are. That's what makes this a good basic one. And the space, they're kind of mid-size. It's not overly small. You wouldn't get the effect that you want. And I like the way these vines move, and it adds a lot of movement to my background. Now, I'm not getting perfect stenciling here by any means, and there's a lot of forgiveness. This is just one more layer in a very, very layered background. I didn't stop to count how many layers, but there's a lot of them. And that builds interest. So you see little bits of every layer in the final piece, and that's what mixed media love is all about. Now I'm using quinacridone magenta, and then I'm going to use turquoise with this, again, a TCW stencil, Retro Burst. Again, one of my favorites. Now I know I've made the decision to put some circles in my plan. So I want some circular elements in my background because I want things to go together. And this one, it resembles kind of the leaves of the vine stencil that I had, but it also, they're in circles. And you're going to see me add more circles in a few seconds here too. So every place you look, as your eye moves across this background, different elements are popping up. And I'm not sure if you can see some of that initial stamping and stenciling that we did. Little bits do peek through. Makes people wonder, how did you get this? So don't forget about those DIY art mark makers. This one is the center of a tape dispenser. It's like a double circle, and again, I wanted to add circles because I know I'm going to use them later to build up, to start my focal images. So here I'm using black. So black and white with whatever color scheme, they provide that contrast. They're what's going to make your page really work together. So you always need to add one of those things, or a much darker version of the color. This is a trivet, silicone trivet, and it makes another perfect mark maker. So walk through Dollar Tree or Dollarama and look at things for texture. If they're out of silicone, the paint comes off really super easy. They make wonderful, wonderful mark makers. Go on a texture hunt. So there we go. And then I am going to edge the whole thing with black. I've got black paint on my blending foam, Ranger blending foam, and I'm putting that all the way around like I edge my pages. Now, all told, this project took about 4 hours, but there are at least six pages here, the equivalent of 6 pages. So, you know, if you are doing this or trying something similar, break it up into doable chunks. You don't have to do it all in one sitting, as I pretty much did. So now that the one side is done, I want to do that same treatment on the other side. I could have gone a total different color scheme, but because when this is flipped over, I want it to work together, I'm sticking with the same, and I'm folding it over because I want to continue that color so that when these two parts are seen, it looks like it's one page. This is me being very particular and me being very precise. By all means, you do not have to do this, but I'm showing you how you can do that if it matters to you. So again, I'm just putting on the paint with my fingers. Nothing more fun than finger painting, people. And I'm just continuing that color so that it flows across as if this was a single page. And once I have the beginning parts of that, I'm going to open it up and continue color across the whole page. Spreading out, I want to make sure I have some of that yellow. I don't want to lose yellow. I found that having yellow in the background is really key, and I use that Naples yellow in my focal images as well. So I really wanted some of it in the background. So now we're going to start building the focal, and there's 3 points to my focal image. The first part is circles, and I'm using, these are wooden coasters that I use to make Christmas ornaments and coasters. I'm just using them as tracers and templates. I'm visual, so I want to see where I want to put these, and I'm going to have them sweeping across both sides of this mini art journal. And I'm just rearranging it and looking. I want my eye to start at the left and kind of swoop across the page. Now, if you don't have the coasters, you can cut out circles from a lid and out of copy paper and do the same things. Then I went and I traced those circles with my Inktense pencil. And I'm using Inktense because it's ink, not watercolor, and it's permanent when it's dry. Now, if you used watercolor, later on that might cause you problems, because when you add wet medium to watercolor or Stabilo all pencils, they reactivate. Now I'm using black acrylic paint and my angle brush, and I'm activating the Inktense, and I'm adding more shading with the acrylic paint. Now all that is being shaded right now, whether it's Inktense or acrylic paint, is permanent when it's completely activated and when it's completely dry. And when I start gluing things down, it doesn't smudge. And if you use watercolor, it would smudge and smear. So here, see that part that overlaps? I've kind of cut the circle so that when it's opened, it works on both sides. Now this, I'm not sure if it's a cherry blossom or apple blossom or dogwood, but it was a free printable, I believe, from supercoloring.com. I've sized it the right size with my printer and printed out the multiples that I needed, cut them out, and then I'm just gluing them down. Now, even close up, if my Inktense had not been fully dry, or if I had used watercolor, when I glue this down, I'd have to be super careful not to smudge the Stabilo all pencil or the watercolor, because then it would affect the white of the printable. Now this is my newest sentiment pack called Choosing Joy. This is kind of the on the way to the finalized project one, the final sentiment pack may be a little bit different, but I'm going to use that. I am making this as an inspirational pamphlet visual to have around me to help me focus on my word of the year, which is joy. And so I've collected quotes and I put it into the sentiment pack, and you can check that out. It will be available for purchase at NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There is a link in the description box. So now I'm just prepping all these sentiments, and I'm bubble cutting here around script and sizing it inside the circle. So my focal image is the circle, the flower, the printable, as well as the sentiment. So each one is a separate focal image that goes across the page. Now the sentiments, I've done the word art for you, picked different size fonts, done some, mixing and matching along the way. And you can use them as they are, or you can alter them, cut them apart, mix and match, however it works for your art journaling and mixed media needs. You can print them on sticker paper, you can size them, you can make them bigger, you can make them smaller. And I include videos on how to do that, giving you basic instructions to do it, although it might vary with your printer. You can also print the sentiments out on tissue paper and then use that in your art journals. So here I'm just gluing everything down with my fluid matte medium, and I love using the Liquitex brand. So I'm just cutting, going as I'm going along. This is the other side. Love that quote, let joy be your compass. That's what I want to do. I want to use, does it bring me joy in what I'm selecting in 2024? Find joy in the ordinary, appreciating joy in everyday things. I will put a link to the video where I talk about my word of the year selection and give you some other ideas of how you can use this sentiment pack or a different sentiment pack that you have. Now the word joy in that one circle was a little too small, so here I'm just going to cut out this much bigger joy word and substitute it because I want to emphasize that word. I could also take that and blow it up on the printer, but I already had it. When I get a sentiment pack, I print it all out and then I have it available to use. I am absolutely loving how this works. Now the sentiments, the leftovers, I just cut them apart a little bit and I put them in these plastic envelopes, and now it's there for me to use any other time. I debated leaving the flowers white, but I decided in the end I'm going to paint them. So I am going to put a base coat of color. So first I am putting a thin coat of white gesso, and then I'm coming in with Naples yellow, and I'm not even waiting for that gesso to dry. I'm going wet on wet, and I want this, I don't want it perfect. I don't want it one tone. I want a mixture of colors and tones of that yellow. Then I'm doing the same thing for the leaves. A coat of gesso, and then I have some Hooker's green, and I'm painting that in there. And because I want it to go with the background, I'm adding a little bit of that Naples yellow into the green so that it goes better with the colors and tones that I already have. So I'm just going to keep going, doing the same steps on each flower, working rather quickly. I'm not being precise here, and the secret here really is go quickly. Don't overthink it and don't try to be perfect. Sometimes I'm overlapping the edge and it kind of goes onto the background. That just makes it look better. I don't want every flower to look the same. The flowers in your garden don't all look the same. Some are brighter, some are duller, some are shaded. So don't worry so much about perfection and have fun with it. Now I do want to remind you, these printables, of course, when I glued them down, I put a coat of the matte medium on top. That sealed the raw copy paper. That's all they are, is copy paper, but it sealed it and allows me to paint more easily on it. So you could use matte medium if you're gluing it down. I just use that. If you don't have matte medium, you can use Mod Podge. You can use clear gesso as well. Something to seal that paper anyways. Otherwise the paint just soaks into the paper and blending is a little bit more difficult. So you can see how that Naples yellow flower really ties in with that background. So now we're going to bring these flowers to life by shading them, and we are going to use some quinacridone magenta and some yellow oxide or yellow ochre, depending on the brand. It's the same color. Basically, it's a darker shade of that Naples yellow, and I've mixed them, and I'm just adding a blush of color to this flower, this floral, and it really brings it to life. You can see the ones that aren't done compared to the ones that I've added the shading, and I'm just dabbing. And again, I'm not being overly precise. I'm going very loose. I'm liking that every flower is different. I add a little bit of color. I can take it off if I don't like it quickly with a baby wipe or my finger. I can come back in after it's dry and add more and deepen it. So here's I believe this one's called Yellow Ochre, and it's the Michaels brand, Artist Loft, and Yellow Oxide, I believe, is the equivalent with the Liquitex Basics. As I said, this whole project took a lot of hours. There was a lot of drying time involved because I collaged a lot of papers down at the beginning and both sides, so both sides had to dry. And then you're repeating a lot of the same thing for multiple elements. In effect, like I said earlier, this is like 6 pages. Adding the green, adding some Naples yellow to that green. Now I chose to do this kind of focal image because I really like that background. I wanted to keep a lot of that background, but also have a focal image. Now I'm just adding a little bit of white highlights on the flowers, just with a little white acrylic paint in my angle brush. And of course I do this on both sides with all the focal images. And then I'm going to shade around the floral element with black acrylic paint and my angle brush. This is called floating acrylic shading technique, and I have a video that teaches this skill. Now you could do this shading with a Stabilo All pencil, but again, that is not permanent. So that's why I prefer this technique to that one. Adding a little bit of black, a little bit of shading on the flowers as well. Turning the page to make it easiest for me to access And then I'm doing the same shading around the sentiments. Now you could use the Posca pen and outline them if you want it, or you can shade this way. That's an option. Again, there's lots of ways you can achieve a same or a similar effect. Then I grab my General's charcoal pencil. This one is the extra soft, and I'm just very loosely, I'm holding the pencil fairly loosely and going rather quickly, just putting some sketchy lines around the floral element. Again, I'm not being precise. I don't care if I'm perfectly, on the petals, on the leaves. I just want to add something. Now, the General's charcoal pencil is not permanent, but this is the last step, or one of the second last steps, and I don't plan on putting any more wet medium on. If you want it to seal that, you can spray that with a Krylon, a workable fixative. Some people also say you can spray it with hairspray and it seals it. And prevents it from smearing and smudging. You can see how every little part adds to the finished product. Then I'm splattering with white thinned paint and then gold paint as well. Because we just need one more layer, right? And then I make sure that this is completely dry before I flip it over and do the same on the other side. Then I decided to grab my wooden letter blocks, letter stamps, and stamp the word joy in different places on the background. I didn't want this to be bold and in your face. I like that it's just kind of slightly hidden, little hints of joy in there. After all, my word of the year is joy, choosing joy. Choosing to find joy, choosing to seek out joy, and choosing to spread joy in the world. You can use silicone letter stamps as well. I had these wooden ones for so long, never used them, and now I absolutely love them and use them all a lot. But you kind of have to give up it being so perfect. I'm always cleaning off the acrylic paint too after I use the acrylic paint with the stamps to keep them going and not ruining them. So here is our completed book. Let joy be your compass. That's the front. And then we open it up, and you can see how this one is still opened, and I've connected it by this circle. Find joy where your feet are. What sparks your joy? Do more of that. And this one, find the joy in the simple things. Take the path that leads to your joy. Joy is always an option. Carry joy in your heart wherever you go. So these are messages that I'm giving myself. And then the other side, find joy in the ordinary. Create your own version of joy, whatever that is. So what brings you joy? Well, doing mixed media and art journaling brings me joy. Doing videos and sharing my love of mixed media. So this can stand like this, or I can put it on a plate rack or a little easel. I can keep it by my bedside to focus myself on my word of the year. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got close-ups of all the components and all the pages of this mini art journal that I've saved from the trash. Until next time, go get creative.